Today, we're going to tackle a massive question, one that's reshaping the modern workplace as we speak. Is all this artificial intelligence that companies are using to hire people actually making the process any fairer? Let's dive in. First off, let's just get a sense of the scale here. We're not talking about some niche experimental tech anymore. We're talking about nearly every single Fortune 500 company. The promise, right, is that AI can make hiring faster, way more efficient, and, this is the big one, more objective than we humans could ever be. And that really brings us to the heart of the matter. The whole sales pitch is that AI can sidestep our all-too-human prejudices. But what if instead of creating some perfect, unbiased system, we're just teaching a machine to copy our own biases, only faster and at a scale we've never seen before? To really understand the risk, you have to look at the times this technology has, well, failed. And it turns out there's a pretty clear pattern of good intentions leading to some seriously troubling results.
And look, this isn't a one-off problem. We see this recurring theme across the biggest names in tech. You had Google in 2015, whose system was showing better job ads to men. Then in 2017, Amazon had to literally scrap its own recruiting tool. And just a couple years later, Facebook's system was caught skewing job ads by gender and race. This is not just a bug, it's a feature of how these systems were learning.
Let's zero in on that Amazon case, because it just perfectly illustrates the problem. The AI was trained on a decade's worth of the company's own hiring data. And because the tech industry historically has been dominated by men, the AI taught itself that male candidates were just preferable. It got so good at this, it actually started penalizing resumes that had the word women's in them. So get this, being the captain of the women's chess club would literally count against you. The AI didn't invent this bias out of thin air. It learned it from us.
So, the big question is, how does this actually happen? Why does a system that's designed for pure objectivity end up reinforcing the very stereotypes it was supposed to get rid of?
Okay, this is probably the most important concept to get your head around. AI is a mirror. It doesn't have its own opinions. It doesn't have prejudices. It simply finds patterns in the data we feed it. So if our history of hiring is full of bias, the AI is going to learn that bias as a successful pattern and just do it again. It's holding up a mirror to our own society.
And this bias can creep in at every single stage of the game. I mean, it starts with the job ad itself. If your language is skewed, you're already shrinking your talent pool. Then, during screening, the AI might start favoring keywords that are more common on resumes from certain groups. Get to the interview, and an AI analyzing speech might not be trained on diverse accents. And finally, at the offer stage, if you're using historical salary data, you can just end up perpetuating old pay gaps. The whole pipeline is like a minefield.
At the core of all of this is what researchers call training data bias. Just like we saw with Amazon, if you feed an AI a diet of biased decisions from the past, it's going to learn to make biased decisions in the future. It's the classic garbage in, garbage out problem, but with huge consequences for people's careers.
But it gets even trickier. You might be thinking, okay, simple. Let's just remove sensitive data like race and gender. The problem is, there's something called proxy bias. The AI is smart enough to find stand-ins or proxies. A certain zip code might correlate really strongly with race. The name of an all-women's college is a pretty darn good proxy for gender, right? So even when you try to hide the protected data, the AI can often figure it out anyway.
So if the problem is this complicated, what are we actually doing about it? The good news is there's a whole field of research dedicated to trying to build fairer algorithms. People are on it.
The very first step in fighting bias is being able to spot it. And in the United States, a key legal benchmark for this is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's 4/5 rule. It's basically a simple statistical test to see if a hiring practice is having a negative effect on a specific group. Okay, let me show you how it works. In this example, 60% of white applicants get hired, but only 30% of black applicants do. So what you do is you divide the lower rate by the higher one. So 30 divided by 60, that's 50%. Since 50% is way less than 4/5, or 80%, this hiring practice gets flagged for having an adverse impact. It's a clear, mathematical way to spot potential discrimination. But defining fairness itself is really complex, because there are these competing ideas. That 4/5 rule we just talked about, that's a form of group fairness. It looks at the big picture, at statistical outcomes for whole groups. But there's another really important idea called individual fairness, which says that two people with similar qualifications should get similar outcomes, no matter what group they're in. And here's the kicker. Trying to make a system that satisfies both of these at the same time can be mathematically impossible. That's a huge challenge.
So, how do they try to fix this? Well, researchers are focused on three main strategies. You've got pre-processing, which is where you try to clean the bias out of the data before you even train the model. Then there's in-processing, where you build fairness rules directly into the AI's learning process. And finally, there's post-processing, which is basically taking the model's results and tweaking them after the fact to make sure everything looks fair.
But maybe fixing the code is only half the battle. Some really interesting new research suggests there might be a much simpler, more effective approach. It's less about complex math and more about, well, just communicating better.
This quote from Professor Heng Su just hits the nail on the head. We have been giving the AI the wrong job this whole time. We ask it to select the best person to hire. But in reality, nobody's letting an AI make that final call. What the hiring manager really wants is just a solid list of good people to interview. This simple mix-up changes everything.
Let's break this down because this is a real game changer. When you ask an AI to select a final hire, it gets scared of being wrong. It becomes risk-averse. So it picks the safest choice, someone who looks just like everyone hired before. And it might filter out a really high-potential but maybe unconventional candidate. But when you just ask it to screen for a pool of promising people, it's free to suggest a more diverse group, including those high-risk, high-reward applicants that a human can then check out in an interview. We've been using a hammer when we really needed a sieve.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We've seen that AI is this incredibly powerful mirror, reflecting the patterns and the prejudices of the people who made it. The whole mission to build a fair AI is forcing us to confront the unfairness in our own ways of doing things. So the ultimate question might not be about algorithms at all. To fix the code, do we first need to fix ourselves?